Chapter 16. How to Become Invisible. The next morning, Kemp heard a loud noise and went to see his guest. "What's the matter?" asked Kemp when the invisible man let him in. "Nothing," was the answer. "But, good heavens, what was that crash?" "I lost my temper," said the invisible man. "I forgot this arm, and it's sore." "You're rather in the habit of losing your temper."
"I am."
"Your story is in the papers," Kemp said. The invisible man swore. "Come and have some breakfast," said Kemp, leading the way. "Before we can do anything else," he went on, "I must understand a little more about you." He had sat down with the air of a man who means to talk seriously.
"It's simple enough," said Griffin.
"No doubt it's simple enough to you, but—" Kemp laughed. "Well, yes, to me it seemed strange at first, no doubt. But we can still do great things. I found the secret first at Chesilstowe College." "Chesilstowe?" "I went there after I left London. You know, I have always been interested in light."
"Ah."
"I said, I will give my life to this. This is worth my trouble. You know what fools we are at 22. Fools then and fools now," said Kemp. "As though just knowing could satisfy a man. I saw a way to change the human body, or any other kind of body." And then the strange man, or rather the clothes of a man sitting opposite Kemp, explained how a student of science had disappeared. "If you take a small piece of glass and crush it into powder, the powder is white and solid like salt. You can't see through it. Human flesh, white paper, cloth, hair are really made of a kind of powder. The tiny grains of powder break up the light which shines on them, so that it can't shine through them, and that is why we can see flesh and paper. Now, if you could smooth the broken grains of powder so that they would not break up the light, they would no longer look solid. The light would shine through them, just as now the sun is shining through me. You can try it with a piece of white paper and a drop of oil. Pour a little oil on the paper, and things will begin to show through it. If the oil is good enough and the paper is bad enough, you will be able to see through the paper to the print on the other side. That is because the oil is smooth, and it smooths out the rough surfaces of each little grain of the powder. Well, I found something which would do to human flesh what the oil does to the paper, and would do it so perfectly that there is no tiny part of my body which holds up the light. It is as if you had taken powdered glass and turned it back into the unbroken glass of that window." The explanation, as always between two scientists, led to all kinds of questions. Kemp was so surprised at the story that he nearly forgot that his friend was invisible. "Yes," said the voice, "I had found it all. The way was open. And then, after years of care and working in secret, then I knew that I could do nothing. I knew, and I was helpless. And that was after 3 years of secrecy and hard work." "Why could you do nothing?" asked Kemp. "I had no money," said the invisible man, and went to stare out of the window. He turned round. "I robbed the old man. Robbed my father. The money was not his. And he shot himself." Chapter 17. The Experiment. For a moment, Kemp sat in silence, staring at the back of the headless figure at the window. Then he rose, took the invisible man's arm, and turned him away from the view. "You're tired," he said, "and while I'm sitting down, you walk around. Have my chair." He got up and stood between Griffin and the nearest window. For a time Griffin sat silently, and then he went on with his story. "I'd already left the college," he said, "when that happened. It was last December. I had taken a room in London, in a big house in Great Portland Street. It was all like a dream, that short visit to my father in my old home. When I returned to my room, it seemed like waking from a dream to reality. Here were the things I knew and loved. Here was the equipment. The experiments were arranged and waiting. And now there was hardly any difficulty left, beyond the planning of details. I will tell you, Kemp, sooner or later, all the complicated details. We need not talk about that now. For the most part, except for certain words I chose to remember, they are written in those books that tramp has hidden, in a way that only I can understand. We must hunt him down. First, I tried some white wool. It was the strangest thing in the world to see it lose its substance like smoke and disappear. I could hardly believe I had done it. I put my hand into the emptiness, and there was the thing as solid as ever. I felt it, and threw it on the floor. I had a little trouble finding it again. And then I heard a noise behind me, and, turning, saw a white cat, very dirty, outside the window. A thought came into my head. "Everything is ready for you," I said, and went to the window, opened it, and called softly. She came in. The poor creature was thirsty, and I gave her some milk. After that, she went smelling round the room, plainly with the idea of making herself at home. The invisible wool upset her a bit. You should have seen her attack it. But I made her comfortable on my bed. "And then you made the cat invisible?" "Yes. It took 4 hours. "You don't mean to say there's an invisible cat in the world?" said Kemp. "If it hasn't been killed," said the Invisible Man. "Why not?" "Why not?" repeated Kemp. "Go on." He was silent for a few minutes, and then continued. "My only clear thought," he said, "was that the thing had to be completed, and it had to be done soon, for I had little money left. After a time I ate some food and went to sleep in my clothes on my bed. I was woken by a loud knock at the door. It was the owner of my room. He said I had been hurting a cat in the night, he was sure. He wanted to know all about it. I told him there had been no cat in my room. Then the noise of my experiments could be heard all over the house, he said, and that was true, certainly. He came into the room, asked me what I was doing, and said it had always been a respectable house. In the end I got angry, pushed him out and shut the door. He made some noise outside, but I didn't listen. After a time he went away. But I didn't know what he planned to do, nor even what he had the power to do. To move to new rooms would have meant delay. I had £20 left in the world, most of it in a bank. If he brought the police, my room might be searched. What could I do? Disappear, of course. It was all done that evening and night. There was some pain at first. I felt sick. At times I cried out. I talked aloud to myself, but I did not give up. I shall never forget seeing my hands. They became white as white paper, and then, slowly, became like glass. And then they had disappeared. At first I was weak as a little child, walking on legs I could not see. I slept during the morning, pulling a sheet over my eyes to shut out the light, and I was woken again by a knocking. My strength had returned. I sat up and listened, and heard talking. Soon the knocking was repeated and voices called. To gain time, I answered them. My window opened onto a roof. I stepped through it, closed it, stood outside and watched. The old man and his 2 sons came into the room. You may imagine their surprise at finding the room empty. One of the younger men rushed to the window at once, threw it open and stared out. His eyes and his thick-lipped, bearded face came close to my own. He looked right through me. So did the others. The old man went and looked under the bed. While they were all talking together, I came back into the room, slipped past them, and went down the stairs. In one room, I found a box of matches, and when they had come down, I returned to my own room and set fire to the papers, the bed covers, and the furniture. You set the house on fire? Set the house on fire, yes. It was the only way to hide my tracks. For the next hour he went on with his story, and Kemp listened. It was the story of how the Invisible Man had got some clothes, how he lived by getting food and drink wherever he could, of the shelter he found and the beds he slept in, until he came to Iping. Chapter 18. The Plan That Failed. "But now," said Kemp, looking out of the window, "what are we to do?" He moved nearer to his guest, so that he did not see the three men who were coming up the hill road, too slowly, as it seemed to Kemp. "What were you planning to do when you were going to Port Burdock? Did you have a plan?" "I was going to leave the country. But I have rather changed that plan since seeing you. I thought it would be wise, now the weather is hot, to make for the south, especially as my secret was known, and everyone would be watching for a man all wrapped up like me. You have regular boats from here to France. My idea was to get on board one. Then I could go by train into Spain or else to Algiers. It wouldn't be difficult. There a man could be invisible all the time, but still live and do things. I was using that tramp as a money box and carrier until I decided how to get my books and things sent over to join me." "That's clear." "And then he tried to rob me. He has hidden my books, Kemp. Hidden my books. If I can get hold of him, I'll—" "You'd better get the books from him first." "But where is he? Do you know?" "He's in the town police station, locked up at his own request, in the strongest room in the place." "The rat," said the Invisible Man. "But that delays your plans a little." "We must get those books. Those books are necessary." "Certainly," said Kemp, a little anxiously, unsure if he heard footsteps outside. "Certainly we must get those books. But that won't be difficult, if he doesn't know they're for you." "No," said the Invisible Man, thoughtfully. Kemp tried to think of something to keep the conversation going, but the Invisible Man continued himself. "Coming into your house, Kemp," he said, "changes all my plans. For you are a man who can understand. You are a scientist. You have told no one I'm here?" "Not a soul." "If we are to make any use of being invisible, we must start by killing." "Killing?" repeated Kemp. "I'm listening to your plan, but I'm not agreeing. Why killing?" "The point is this. They know as well as we do that there is an invisible man, and that invisible man, Kemp, must now start to rule by terror. Yes, I mean it. To rule by terror. He must take a town like your Burdock and put the fear of God into it. He must give orders. He can do that in many ways. And he must kill everybody who disobeys his orders, and everybody who works against him." "Really?" said Kemp, no longer listening to Griffin, but to the sound of his front door opening and closing. The Invisible Man had also heard the sound. "Listen," he said. "What is that downstairs?" Nothing," said Kemp, and suddenly he began to speak loud and fast. "I don't agree to this, Griffin," he said. "Understand me, I don't agree to this. Why do you wish to be alone? Why not tell everyone? Think how much better it would be. You might have 1,000,000 helpers." The Invisible Man raised his hand. "There are footsteps coming upstairs," he said. "Nonsense," said Kemp. "Let me see," said the Invisible Man, and went to the door and listened. And then things happened very quickly. Suddenly, the clothes sat down and opened as the unseen man began to undress. Kemp opened the door. As he opened it, there came sounds of hurrying feet and voices downstairs. With a quick movement, Kemp pushed the Invisible Man back, jumped aside, and shut the door behind him. The key was outside and ready. In another moment, Griffin would have been locked in the room, except for one little thing. The key fell noisily on the floor. Kemp's face became white. He tried to hold the door handle with both hands. For a moment, he pulled at it. Then the door opened slightly, but he got it closed again. The second time it was opened a foot, and the clothes came into the opening. Kemp's throat was seized by invisible fingers, and he let go of the handle in order to defend himself. He was forced back and thrown heavily to the floor. Halfway up the stairs was Colonel Adie, the chief of the Burdock police. He was staring at the sudden appearance of Kemp, followed by the clothes, which danced in the air. He saw Kemp fall and then struggle to his feet. He saw Kemp rush forward and go down again. Then, suddenly, he was struck. By nothing. A great weight, it seemed, jumped on him, and he was thrown down the staircase. An invisible foot stepped on his back. Faint steps passed downstairs. He heard the 2 police officers in the hall shout and run, and the sound of the front door of the house as it shut. He rolled over and sat up, staring. He saw Kemp coming down the staircase, his face white and bleeding. "My God!" cried Kemp. "I couldn't stop him. He's gone.